If you've been somewhat active in the Ongezellig community, you've probably heard the bad news. Despite its positive reception and dedicated fanbase, Ongezellig never managed to gain quite enough support to continue. After the pilot finished, the project was put on indefinite hiatus, and after an unsuccessful pitching phase and no hope of continuing Ongezellig on his own, Studio Massa, the creator of Ongezellig, announced on September 21st, the day of the created song ever created, that Ongezellig was discontinued, putting the nails in the coffin and laying to rest the dream that Ongezellig could ever get a proper follow-up.
Dus is het aus.
And yet, ironically enough, it was on that same day the closest thing to an Ongezellig sequel was discovered, that being Maya's Diary. In November of 2018, Studio Massa released a short comic strip called Maya's Sweet 16. On one of the panels, Maya's email is visible. Someone discovered that by emailing this address she'd receive short entries in Maya's diary. This went on from November 23rd to February 11th. And although the diary doesn't serve as a proper narrative continuation with no real character development, it's the farthest piece of official Ongezellig media on the timeline and gives additional insight on Maya's state of mind, which as it turns out is completely fucked. But before I get into the diary, I would like to cover the Sweet 16 comic first, considering its referenced a handful of times in the diary. The comic follows Maya on her 16th birthday. Maya stays up late until the clock hits midnight, when she surprisingly gets a message. However, her enthusiasm quickly dissolves as it turns out to just be a bot message. Disappointed, Maya decides to go to sleep. As she tries to fall asleep, she's greeted by a single piece of birthday cake, and she's delighted to see it. When suddenly she hears a voice tauntingly say, "Look whose birthday it is." Isn't she the sister of Coco and Mai Mai? I don't even remember her name. Should we congratulate her? Why should we? Isn't she giving a party? She probably doesn't even have someone to invite. She would have been better off staying at home today. Perhaps just celebrate at home. As if there's anything even worth celebrating. In a panic, Maya wakes up. Not wanting to face the day ahead of her, she grabs a bucket and gets on her knees. The next morning, as Coco and Mai Mai come to wish Maya a happy birthday, they are confronted by Maya's mother telling them that she's sick, further stating that Maya needs sleep and that they should get ready for school. Not wanting to leave without congratulating her, Coco enters Maya's room anyway. She catches Maya on her computer snacking on papernoten. After an awkward silence, Coco simply wishes Maya a happy birthday and leaves. Realizing Coco knows she isn't sick, Maya slowly faces her computer and breaks down. Yeah, so appelsapje. If there's one thing that this comic does, it's really put on display how bad Maya has it. Like, you could tell she wasn't doing very great based on the pilot, but here it's way more apparent just how down in the dirt she is. She fears being the center of any form of attention and the things people might say so much that she decides to purge herself or get herself to throw up just to escape the mere possibility of it happening. The Ongezellig wiki states that the remarks in Maya's dreams are whispers she overheard on the previous birthday, but I think it's just as likely these are completely made up by Maya.
We made this one up.
As she seems to make very quick assumptions about what people are gonna say, and considering just how low her self-esteem probably is, it's entirely possible this is just how she reckons people think of her. But we don't know for certain. But without further ado, let's get into the real sauce of the video. The diary. Entry number 1, November 23rd. Maya reflects on the history lesson she had about Anne Frank. While she says she wasn't very interested in the lesson, it did give her the idea to start the diary. Maya further says she's worried about the upcoming class lottery, as she doesn't yet have an excuse not to attend. Maya also remembers it's been 2 months since her birthday and that Coco pretends she hasn't seen anything. After which she writes, "It's for the better. She wouldn't understand it anyway." This entry ends on Maya remembering that Coco's birthday is in the weekend, expecting Coco to take full advantage of it, and telling herself that she'll need to watch out. Entry 2, November 30th. Maya once again reflects on her history class, calling Anne Frank, and I quote, a beta. No, I am not making this up, here it is. And Maya says she could sort of relate to Anne Frank, noting her lack of contact to the outside world and below average looks as the reason why. But the sense of relatability is shattered once Maya learns that Anne Frank actually got laid once, and starts to feel really bad about herself when she begins dwelling on that fact. Maya's worry of needing to come up with an excuse not to partake in the class lottery is gone, because she isn't invited. Upon which Maya comments, "I should feel relieved by that, but I don't." ending the entry saying she wished she could just sleep through the entire winter. Entry 3, December 7th. Maya and Maimai were the only two of the class not to attend the lottery. Maya was asked by Coco why she didn't show up, telling her that she wasn't invited. But as it turns out, there were no invitations. Unbeknownst to Maya, you had to register yourself to take part. Maya further writes that her mother asked her if there was anything she wanted for Sinterklaas, telling her mother that all she wanted was more pepernoten, hoping for enough to get through the entire winter and also hoping it will solve her underweight problem. Entry 3 ends as Maya expresses her relief that Sinterklaas is over, but calls it the silence before the storm with Coco's birthday rapidly approaching. Entry 4, December 9th. Maya furiously writes, "I fucking knew it," as she expresses in horror that Coco invited the entire class over for her birthday, with confirmation that everyone is coming. Everyone except for Maya. As you can imagine, this is a nightmare for Maya, who describes it as blackmail, as she feels that Coco intensely did this to put her on the spot. Because if Maya joins the party, she'll do nothing but stand in the corner with the feeling of fear, shame and humiliation, and if she doesn't join, she'll upset Coco and would be forced to listen to the joy of others while being alone in a room. That is, unless she purposely does something so stupid to get out of her predicament, that nobody would ever believe she'd purposely do that to get out of her predicament. Entry 5, December 15th. Maya's solution to Coco's birthday party is to voluntarily jump off the stairs, hoping her injuries won't be too grave to end up in the hospital, but enough not to have to attend Coco's birthday party and be forced to stay in bed the entire weekend. And perhaps even add an entire week to her holiday break, which Maya feels like she deserves after the multiple panic attacks she got planning this. Entry 6, December 16th. But as it turns out, she doesn't have the nerve to do it. I learned that fantasizing about doing something stupid is easier than actually doing something stupid. Maya says she spent the whole week coming up with reasons to justify doing it, but once she looked down the stairs, every reason not to came up in her. But the one thing that ultimately convinced her not to go through with it was the question, what would Coco think about it? Choosing not to jump, she went back into her room and not knowing what to do, just waited for Coco to invite her. When Coco inevitably asked her to join the party, Maya hoped she was brave enough to accept the invitation, but alas, she wasn't. Finishing the entry saying, "It sounds nice enough without that boring girl." Entry 7, December 21st. Maya calls the holiday break the worst break there is. Her reasoning being, when you finally don't have to go to school, you're forced to celebrate some stupid holiday with a just as stupid family. New Year's is even worse. Just a bunch of drunk idiots making noise because the year changed numbers. So instead of relaxing, I get stressed out over my obligations. Maya notes that Coco was distant this week, but doesn't give a reason why. This entry ends on Maya saying she finally found a personality test that suits her, saying the depressing result is the reason why she trusts this one. Entry 8, December 27th. Maya voices her frustration as she recollects what was said during Christmas. Coco and Maimai were praised for their athletic, musical and artistic talents, and were being told that everyone is proud of them. And all Maya received was just a, "Oh, hi." But Maya shows some restraint in her annoyance, writing, "Maya, how can you hate on Christmas?" seeming to laugh it off. Entry 9, date unknown. With the school closed and much to Maya's dismay, Coco takes her band practice home. Interestingly enough, Maya expresses that she always wanted to learn to play an instrument, but because she was too afraid of Maimai laughing her ass off and the annoyance of Coco constantly trying to help her, she never tried. Maya starts to talk shit about the band, thinking the only reason Coco even participates is just because they are her friends, and that she feels the need to have as many as possible, which gets Maya to ask the question, do friends even mean anything when you have so many? Maya also recalls an awkward encounter she had with one of Coco's friends named Zoe. Maya accidentally bumped into her whilst going to the bathroom, and instead of greeting each other, both just looked each other in the eye until Zoe walked away. Zoe appears to be the more introverted type, which doesn't go unnoticed by Maya, who questions how Zoe has friends while she doesn't, despite Maya's claim that she talks just as little. And unfortunately for Maya, Zoe also stayed the night, which meant that she wasn't just kept awake by their encounter, but also between the banter between Zoe and Coco, which Maya describes as a 5-hour-long podcast with the most boring people you could imagine.
This is great banter!
Entry 10, January 28th. Maya talks about how she tried learning Japanese once, stating she quickly learned 2 full scripts in just 3 days but quickly gave up when trying to learn the kanji script. Maya says nothing else worth noting has happened except for when her mother asked her to help out at her grandparents' store, which apparently almost gave Maya a heart attack. Maya says that the only reason she hasn't cut herself yet is because she never has to go outside. Come again? And she questions why her mother would even ask her for such a thing, as she feels like she wouldn't be of much help. Saying, I don't think they'll get much use out of a cashier with the aura of an aborted blobfish. But Maya makes sense of it all by saying, but I can imagine your own blood doesn't mean a whole awful lot to you when you're brought 2 replacements to compensate. But despite what her previous sentence very much implies, Maya seems to reject any notion of having mommy issues, as she'd rather not have another person trying to be as involved as Coco, saying that as long as her mother leaves her alone, Maya won't have a reason to cut herself. Maya further states that she never really understood why people cut themselves, as when she tried it, it just hurt, which she chalks up as just her not being miserable enough. However, she fully expects that to change in the next 2 weeks, with the second most demoralizing day of the year coming. That being Valentine's Day. Entry 11, February 11th. Maya goes into detail about why she hates Valentine's Day so much, explaining how every Valentine's Day the school organizes a way for students to give a rose to the person they fancy. As it turns out, Maya always gets one from Coco out of what Maya perceives as pity. And even though she believes Valentine's Day exists just so people can sell shitty perfumes and knows she'll never get another one, deep down she always hopes for a second rose. And in order to prevent the inevitable disappointment, her solution is to remember why she'll never get a second one, to remind herself of just how boring and ugly she is, no matter how tiresome it becomes. Entry 12, Valentine's Day. Dear Diary, Valentine's Day. I got a second rose today. It's currently torn up in the bin, and everything just got worse. I'll explain later. I got to try something first. Entry 13, as woensdag. To Maya's absolute disappointment, she explains that Coco gave a rose to everyone in the class, and the second rose she received was also from Coco. Completely blinded by rage, Maya tore up both of her roses in full view of the rest of the class. When Maya got home, she locked herself in a room just waiting for Coco to beat the shit out of her. But instead of knocking all her teeth out or leaving her to starve for that night like she expected, Coco instead apologizes to Maya. This makes Maya feel so much guilt, she chooses to intensely starve herself out as punishment. Not only skipping dinner, but also choosing to skip both breakfast and lunch, despite the massive stomachache she has. She says her stomachache was in fact so painful she completely forgot she was Maya and therefore actually considers the day better than usual. It's not until the next evening, after an entire day, that she eats again. And still she feels bad about it. Maya continues to eat nothing but dinner for the next 3 weeks, causing her to go from an already underweight 44 kilograms to just 40. Maya justifies all this by saying that she isn't anorexic and is in fact fasting, because that's just something Brabanders do before carnival. And Maya finishes the diary by saying, normally I feel like throwing up during carnival, but that's probably not gonna happen when you got nothing to throw up. And that, ladies and gentlemen, were all the entries in Maya's diary. What the fuck did I just read? The one thing you'll notice by reading both Maya's Sweet 16 and her diary is that they are significantly darker than the pilot itself. I stated in my Ongezellig review that I was pleasantly surprised that Ongezellig wasn't as bleak as I expected it to be, because this was the tone I originally envisioned Ongezellig was going to have. Hell, even Studio Massa seemingly admitted that perhaps it was just a bit too much. And because of Studio Massa's regret when it comes to the tone, he doesn't recognize Maya's Sweet 16 and by proxy the diaries as canon. I mean, he didn't mention the diaries, but that's probably because everyone including him forgot they even existed. And although that kind of sucks, I think it's not that strange as to why he looks at it like that. Remember, both of these were written before part 2 was even released, and considering Ongezellig's production cycle of 4 years, certain elements are bound to change. The diary is very much a relic of Ongezellig's early days, a time when Studio Massa probably didn't know exactly what he wanted to do. But even if the events of the diary aren't canon, I think the characterization of Maya could still be considered as such, and is interesting enough to deserve the light of day. Speaking of the characterization of Maya, what's wrong with you? Maya is without a doubt the best character in Ongezellig. Whilst I do think that Coco is a fun character and that Mai has way more potential, with what we have, which isn't a whole awful lot, Maya is by far Ongezellig's most interesting and fleshed out character. Something that you'll quickly notice when you hear people discussing Ongezellig is that a lot of people find themselves relating to Maya, but I personally never found her that relatable. Even after learning that I myself might also have ADD, relatability was never the thing that made her an interesting character to me. For me, the appeal was always the relationship she has with the people around her and the fact that she's a ticking time bomb. And since New Year's is my favorite holiday, I have every intention to stick around for the boom. There are a lot of factors relating to Maya's personal struggle, and pretty much all of them stem from her social anxiety. Maya is deathly afraid of anything social, and whilst there's no real explanation or hints given as to why, I believe it has everything to do with the adoption of Coco and Mai Mai. Coco and Mai Mai seem to have been adopted when Maya was around the age of 5. Learning you'll get new siblings typically causes a huge amount of stress in children of that age, and the fact that they were around the same age as Maya and that it may have been incredibly spontaneous for her would have unquestionably added to that stress. Furthermore, nobody except for Maya has a regional accent. This gives way to the idea that Maya's family at one point in time moved away from Noord-Brabant, meaning that whilst Maya was already out of her element, she spontaneously had to share a house with 2 people that don't even speak her language. And as a final source of stress, this would all be around the same time that she'd entered primary school. And because her parents most likely already had their hands full with Coco and Mai Mai, it left Maya with nobody to really turn to, resulting in her feeling completely isolated in her confusion. And once she got used to the feeling of isolation, she never managed to escape it. Whilst I think that these are the most important factors contributing to Maya's situation, I still think that there's a lot more to it. Maya in general also comes across as an asocial bastard. She indirectly tells Mai Mai that they aren't family, she has zero understanding for someone with the same shortcomings as her, as evidenced by her encounter with Zoe, and uses Coco's trauma as a way to get back at her for a perceived insult. That's another thing that I very quickly picked up on, just how resentful Maya is towards everyone around her. Her hatred for Coco can be explained by just how jealous and inadequate she makes her feel. That someone with such a traumatic past can still manage to outdo her. And that to Maya, Coco's attempts to help her are in reality just fronts for her to humiliate Maya. At first I thought that the feelings of jealousy and inadequacy were only directed at Coco, but as it turns out, they count for Mai Mai as well. However, Maya doesn't seem to take Mai Mai nearly as seriously as she does Coco. She's portrayed in Maya's imagination as SpongeBob rather than a perfect princess like Coco, and Maya never refers to her by her actual name in the diary, calling her Pipi as a reference to Pippi Langstrumpf, showing that to some degree Maya actually looks down on her, and just by how annoyed Maya always seems with her, probably hates her guts too. But most shocking of all, Maya shows to be completely apathetic towards her mother, thinking she's just an afterthought to her. While her hate and distaste can mostly be explained by what happened when she was younger, there is a second factor at play: Maya's completely fucked up worldview. Maya hates the people around her because she believes that they hate her. Maya goes to sleep every night believing that the reason why Coco and Mai Mai were ever even adopted in the first place was because she was that big of a disappointment. That Coco is constantly out to get her, and that everyone hates her. And this line of thinking has completely destroyed her self-esteem, to the point that she thinks herself so worthless that she thinks it's pointless to even try and socialize, because in her mind there's absolutely nothing to like about her. Maya knows herself and doesn't recommend her to anyone. And her low self-esteem has slowly evolved into self-hatred. And it's how Maya can justify doing such horrible things to herself. Every time Maya screws up, she's one step closer to proving to herself that she's indeed the failure she believes her parents think of her. However, Maya would never be able to handle such an idea. And instead of admitting there's a problem, she starts telling herself things. That friendship is overrated. That she doesn't need it. That she doesn't need anyone. However, just one quick look makes it very clear that that's not the case. She feels bad when she thought she wasn't invited to the class lottery, feels inadequate by those with friend groups and relationships, and the most obvious sign, her daydreams with her imaginary friends. Hell, the only thing she's seen enjoying between the pilot, comics and diary is watching hentai, a portrayal of connection and intimacy. And the most tragic thing about it is, by denying the truth about her deepest desire, she's actively preventing herself from getting what she truly wants. Maya is stuck in a vicious cycle of failing, denying and isolating. Her choice of isolating herself has robbed her of the opportunity to ever make strong bonds and social skills at a young age, which makes it nearly impossible for her to connect with people. but because she can't accept her own shortcomings, starts telling herself that she's better off alone, even though she knows that that's not true. Maya got stuck in a ditch at a young age and never managed to get back up. But all of this makes it ultimately more satisfying when she eventually does. If you want to read the diary for yourself, I've linked a compilation with all the entries in the description. Whilst it's in Dutch, I'm confident that if you throw it through a translator, you can get the gist of it. It's quite the interesting read, and from the moment I read it, I just knew I had to make a video about it. And coming back to Ongezellig was a lot of fun. Whilst I feel like I did stumble quite a bit at the end, I'm still happy with the end result. But with all of that said, this has been Martin, and I hope to see you another time.
To be or not to be?